Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're telling the stories of Kansas City area nonprofits and the people behind them. Casey Cares is proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kaufman Foundation. I'm Ruth Baum-Biggest. Light pollution is excessive, misdirected, or obtrusive, artificial, usually outdoor light. Too much light pollution has consequences. It washes out the starlight that we see in the night sky. It interferes with astronomical research. It can disrupt ecosystems and it has adverse effects on our health and it wastes energy. Today, we're going to learn more about light pollution. We have the International Dark Sky Association, and we welcome Jackie Bashir, who's vice chair of the Missouri chapter, along with Don Ficken, president of the Missouri chapter of the International Dark Sky Association. Welcome to you both. Jackie, I'm going to start with really the basics. Tell us about the association.
The Astronomical Society of Kansas City or Dark Skies?
Let's start with dark skies.
Okay. Well, IDA, International Dark Sky, started about 40 years ago by two astronomy buddies of mine, David Crawford and Tim Hunter. Tim's still a very active astronomer. He has his own observatory down there in Arizona. But they started it because of the encroachment of a lot of city lights on uh, our astronomy. We're not able to see the night sky so good anymore, and so they started it. But it's grown so big now, and then of course not only we don't like it in astronomy, but it also has a big harm to um, insects and birds and lots of other things. And people are using way too many lights that are unnecessary. So our goal, our deal is to try and minimize some of that excessive light pollution. So
It's
we
it's interesting that this has local connections for this big organization.
exactly. Well, uh, was it 3 years ago? We started the Missouri chapter of IDA, and my friend Don Ficken, he was an officer in the St. Louis Astronomical Society, and so he started this Missouri chapter of IDA, and he contacted me over here on this side of the state, so we'd be all unified, both sides of the state. We got it. So yeah.
Don,
Yes.
you're in control of the state of Missouri chapter. What does the chapter do?
Well, there's several important things we do. The first, and this is the thing that surprised me the most, I think, is, and maybe if I really think about it from my personal perspective, it should not. Most people don't even know that light pollution is an issue. They really don't. They just light up their house, they light up their yard, they light up their streets. They don't think about it too much until they start looking. And then when they realize that not only is it uncomfortable, I mean, all of us have lights where it's been uncomfortable to look at. Like it's so bright, you can't even see something around that, right? I mean, it's something, but you don't think about it much. So I think one of our first jobs is simply to make people aware that this issue even is important. And it's not just important from astronomy, because that's what Jackie and I kind of like to do, but as she's explained very eloquently, it also has lots of impacts on nature, human health, energy saving, all those type of things. So our first job is outreach. The second thing is to make action happen. In other words, it's one thing to talk, it's a second thing to really make it happen. A lot of times we get people will talk to us about, well, my neighbor's lights are too bright, or I've got some bad street light. But the truth is, they need to start at home. They need to look at their own home and find out what's really going on. I think with those couple of basic actions of us explaining to the state what's going on, helping to educate the public, that's a really good start. But it's really moving fast. It is encroaching extremely fast in our state, and we have some pretty dark skies left. We really want to save those, and that's not just it's throughout the state, but also in some of the suburb areas. It's growing. It's growing very, very fast, and it's a big concern of mine personally.
Jackie, how do people know if they're contributing to light pollution? Give us that, hands on in my house. I'm looking in my office thinking, am I polluting?
Well, you are polluting if you have bright lights and you're leaving your shades open at night. But you need to really look at your outdoor lights, because a lot of the outdoor lights just blast light out in a big area. And there's no reason to put any light up in the air to protect your house. They should be shaded, covered, so that the light goes down to where it needs to go. And it doesn't have to be so darn bright either. I mean, people put out these super bright lights. I know years ago, we fought a battle down in Miami County for our Powell Observatory, because the I will speak in generalities here, but the power company was wanting to come in and put in these brand new high pressure sodium street lights, and they said they get so much more light, and trying to talk them into doing it. And they almost had it done until I heard about it. I was president of the club back then, and I did my research, and I found out that the cities in rural America were being charged by, not by how much power was being used, but how much light the fixtures put out. So they were by the lumen. A lumen is how we measure light. So they basically were being lied to. It was going to end up costing them a lot more because of this horrible light it was putting out. So needless to say, all the major towns down there told the power company, no way, Jose. So anyway, and it ended up that, there was a cool letter to the editor that was sent to one of the papers down there. And he was mad because there had been a street light by his house, and it lit up his whole yard, so he didn't have to worry about burglars. And the mayor of, I think it was Paola, said, "Sir, they're street lights, not yard lights." And that shut a lot of that trouble down. So,
Don, I want to toss it back to you. You had mentioned that you like to go out and educate and create awareness. How does the organization do that?
Well, we have a fairly ambitious project, I will say. What we're doing right now is that we are a statewide. Obviously, I'm based in St. Louis, Jackie's in Kansas City. We have board members throughout the state. We purposely divided the state up into regions, and we're making sure we have a board member. And we also have sky quality meters to measure the brightness throughout the state. We have 17 of those throughout the state, all over the place. Kansas City's got several of those. So the way that we do that is we actually literally go out and our board members obviously are outreach people within their areas. So Jackie, for example, like today, we're doing some great talks about light pollution. And that's really a really good way to go about it, is just have champions within the area where they live that are really fighting for what they really believe is right. And that's a really good start for that, I think.
Tell me about these dark sky meters. What do they measure? Where are they? What do they look like?
Well, they're actually pretty cool. If you go to our darkskymissouri.org website, we have just a ton of stuff on there. And they're nothing more than the size of a little Diet Pepsi 2-liter bottle. It's a white thing. They put it onto a pole, and it will run 24/7, measuring the light every 5 minutes. And so this was a project. It's a project being done by Truman State University in Kirksville, and they have students involved. And so literally what they do is once a month, they'll download the data and they'll chart it. And it creates graphs of how bright the sky is, at night. So what's really interesting about this is that obviously you have satellites that can measure from space onto Earth, and they can tell the brightness, okay? But this also measures the brightness when there's clouds, right? So what's funny is that the light, when the clouds are there, in old days, when the clouds there, it got extremely dark, right? Because there were no lights. But today, when the clouds come through, the clouds bounce the light off and make the ground brighter, right? Which means that even is further disruptive to animals and creatures and whatever we're talking about. And so they're trying to actually plot this. That's been a very fun student project up there for them to work on that.
How many, Don, states is the organization in now? Is it all across the country?
It's actually global. There's multiple countries. In fact, we have regular, it's kind of fun because they have such a large presence that we have regular get-togethers of chapter leaders, and they have to have 2 of them because they're in different time zones. I mean, you'll have everybody from India to China to Australia. Sometimes I can barely understand, even though they're talking English. It's like a language, just I almost can't even understand it. But it's a really a large organization, and that is a, it's one of the challenges, I think, is that it is such a large organization. And I will say, I think Europe's a lot more proactive than we are. They're much more on top of light pollution and environmental issues than we are. In fact, one of the frustrations that I had when I first started, I started reading these articles, and I says, I need to read some articles on the US, not Europe. Europe, UK, they're doing all these studies and I'm seeing all this, but where's our articles?
Jackie, I want to dive in a little deeper and get into some details. As I was preparing for our webcast, it was information was talking about three types of light pollution. Can you enlighten our audience? What are those, I guess, sources of it? And is it all bad?
Well, not all of it's bad. There's some good lighting out there. We have a card that we put off, by the way. Here it's called Protecting the Night Skies, and it tells you how to start, protecting it and like putting on shielded fixtures and things like that. So I don't, Don, I don't know exactly what types of lights. Three types. Do you know?
I'm not sure I understand what the three types of lights are that we're
No,
talking.
we don't get that.
Oh, I threw that at you and from your website. I love it. So everybody, we're going to have to go investigate that. But Jackie, I want to go back to that card. How could people get that card? Where could they find that information?
Well, this is on our website, and they can order some of these cards from IDA or us. And see, it has on the front stop light pollution, and that shows how horrible. See all the lights there? That's the United States. And every batch of light you see right there is wasted energy. All that light going straight up to space. It's just a horrible, horrible waste. You can see it there. So, and then on the other side as well. And they can always contact me because I have a supply. We have a supply of a lot of brochures here that will help people if they're trying to fight a battle like this. Like here's one on how it harms wildlife, and then there's one on how it can put your health at risk. Then we got how it just plain wastes energy is what I hit on before. All that light going nowhere, and it's just a waste. And let's see what else is here. I think I missed.
Now,
anyway.
folks could order that through your website, which is
Yes.
darkskymissouri.org. Don?
You're muted, Ruth.
There.
They can all, sorry about that. That's the joys of doing this.
There you go.
People can order that through your website, which is darkskymissouri.org. Don, I wanted to ask you specifically, let's get into those three major areas of harm. Why don't we talk about human harm first? How can too much light hurt us?
It's really an interesting issue. When I was reading, I first started getting involved in this, I was reading, and they said that in many ways, light pollution is like cigarettes were in the 50s. They know it's bad, but they were having trouble finding what was really, to pull the data to really support that. And one of our board members is actually, he's with Washington University in St. Louis, and he's very much into the biology of what's going on. He goes, I don't buy all that. He goes, the truth is, it's really bad for us. It impacts our melatonin, for example. In other words, if you go back billions of years, we had this natural light cycle where whenever it started getting dark, and it basically triggered your body to start melatonin, which actually lets you sleep better, right? So when you have lights on all the time, it creates stress on your body. Everything from your heart to how your body is regulated, all that is impacted. Now, different people react differently. I mean, some people can handle it pretty well. Some people can't handle it pretty well. And of course, you got night shifts, day shifts, all that kind of stuff. But it's pretty clear that humans are being impacted negatively by light. And what is difficult is that there are so many other factors that are going on. For example, weight, other kinds of things to isolate just that. But be clear, there is definitely some impact of light pollution on people. It'll vary by person. So it is a concern. And people, when they talk about crime, they say, well, the reason we have to have these lights, right, is because we want to be safe. That's the whole argument, right? And the truth is that one of our board members, who's pretty smart, he said, well, if that's true, then why wouldn't New York be the safest place in the world? Because the lights are lit up all the time. And the truth is, crime is really created by criminals. They like to hide in shadows. So if you have really bright lights, guess what? It creates bright shadows, right? And so they can hide in there. And so there's really not a lot of evidence, I don't think. It's one of those things. It's kind of like a mom's tale. It's been passed down, passed down, passed down. Everybody just keeps repeating, well, bright lights makes it safer, but it's not true. The evidence simply isn't there to show that.
Jackie, can you talk about the harm light pollution is to wildlife?
Oh boy, there's well, the one that we get into most often is birds, because, and we've had a lot to do with that lately, haven't we, Don?
Yes.
But over in St. Louis in particular, and in Kansas City as well, because we have so many lights on at night, like down in Kansas City, Missouri, lighting up all the buildings. And it's really rough on the birds during migration in May and September, October in there. And the birds see a building and they see the lights lit up, and they just, it looks like it's daytime. It looks like they see the light and the around them, and they think, oh well, so I just keep going, and they smash into the buildings. So during migration in times, there's literally thousands of birds that die in all the major cities during each particular time. So that's a bad news. And then insects is another thing. Insects are pretty important to the whole ecosystem of, animals and stuff. And unfortunately, there's a lot of things like mayflies that swarm around in certain times of the year. But if we have outside lights on, they swarm around the light, and they just die. So and they're important to a lot of ecosystems around the world. That's just one example.
It throws off their mojo.
It does.
And I know one of the stories on the website, I think, talked a little bit about turtles, sea turtles, when they hatch, that if they see the light, it distracts them and they don't get to the sea, I believe.
Right. Yeah.
So it has this huge impact. Don, why do you think people are not so aware of the bad side of us lighting up the night sky?
Well, I have to start with myself. I will say that, obviously I've been a nature lover and more recently an amateur astronomer, and I didn't think about it, honestly. I really didn't think about it at all until about 3 years ago. And I started obviously thinking about it from an amateur astronomer's point of view and saying, well, I just thought people were kind of working on that. And then the more I dove into it, the more I realized, wow, this is bad stuff. I didn't even think about it. And the truth is that once you start realizing, you start looking around, you realize there's sky glow. You realize there's bright lights in your face. You realize everybody's got their lights on. You realize there's really blue lights. It's almost hard to see something. It's one of those things that you don't really look until you start looking, kind of thing. And that's important. And I would like to, if I could, talk just a little bit about what Jackie was talking about, bird migration. Would it be okay? So one of the IDA projects, Missouri projects, is that we have assembled a pretty impressive group called Lights Out Heartland. And it's a series of Audubon and conservation groups that are really working to improve the migration of birds. In fact, just last week I was on the phone. We were on a Zoom call with Kansas City Zoo, for example. They're doing actually a bird fatality count, on the zoo, and I think they're probably going to join it. We already have the St. Louis Zoo involved in this. We have the St. Louis Audubon Society, the Burroughs Audubon Society in Kansas City. And what we do is we get together monthly to figure out how do we improve the safety of birds. And here's the statistic that is really too bad to really even talk about. There was a Cornell study of birds, and what they looked at the 125 most dangerous cities for bird migration. Now realize Kansas City is on the Mississippi Flyway. So is St. Louis. It's one of the busiest flyways for spring migration north and then of course fall migration south. Kansas City is number 7th on that list for spring and number 8 for fall. That's devastating.
For migration or migration death?
Migration deaths.
Wow.
Yes. Now, not to be outdone, St. Louis is number 5 and number 6. Okay. Chicago's number 1 in both. So this is devastating. So this group that we're putting together is really focusing on raising awareness of how dangerous this is for birds, but we're also trying to get buildings to turn off their lights. We're trying to get buildings to register to turn off their lights, particularly during the peak migration periods. In St. Louis, we've got the Arch turning off their lights. We have several of the county, we have a resolution where the county was encouraging folks to do that. And we need to see more of that in Kansas City. We need to get more engaged. So we're trying to raise the awareness of it. And it's not just lights, by the way, it's a lot of other things. There's a lot of things that are contributors. For example, just the way the windows are shiny. You know, maybe that's a contributor. Maybe it looks like they can fly through it because it doesn't have a pattern on it or something like that. Sometimes it's the atrium will create a place where birds get completely trapped. But what we do know is that birds look at the moon and the Milky Way to navigate. And when they can't see that and they go into lights, they get confused. An example, 911, when they had this memorial, they had the lights shining up. They had to turn the lights off every 20 minutes because the birds get trapped. They get trapped in the lights and they have to turn them off every once in a while to let them get off, and then they turn it back on to be able to do that. So there's definitely some impact of light and bird migration. And who doesn't like a bird, right? I mean, we all love birds.
So, Jackie, the one thing that we did skip over, and to Don's point, is the economic impact of lighting and lighting at night. How big is that? What are we talking dollar wise?
Well, I'm sure it's a huge number. Lots of all of that light, like I showed you on this card, that's just wasted, totally wasted. And I don't even know what the numbers are, but what was I going to say?
My guess is,
lost my thought.
that's okay. My guess is, Don, that's in the millions of dollars. Light the Arch is no small thing. To light, nor our own homes. Is there data that indicates how much money or percent we could save if we turned off the lights?
Yeah, there's definitely, well, what's happened too, though, is that the LEDs are actually very efficient. And so by converting to LEDs, and we do propose that people do that. But the trouble is it's how the brightness of that what they call the Kelvin, the color temperature, where it's pointed, all that. So LEDs are actually making significant savings as far as an individual home. The problem is that people are adding more lights because they're cheaper, right? They can add more lights. Now, let's go back to the energy savings for a second. One of our board members did a little calculation one time. He said, if you just take street lights and just the light that is actually pointed up, just that, between like a level up like that. He says, if you took all the savings of the street lights, we could fund the national park system just on that savings alone. Just saving the money of the light that would go up and not actually have that go up anymore. Just reduce the lights to where you don't worry about that going up. And by the way, in Missouri, we're primarily coal driven. And guess what? The more energy that you create, the more coal you burn to create that energy, right? That means there's more carbon in the air, which means there's other impacts on that. So it's a cycle that we have to get out of at some point.
So are you telling us we need to be in the dark, or we just need to change the way we light?
I think we would not ever advocate that we need to be in the dark. I think we need to make smart use of lights. That's what it amounts to. In other words, one of the fun things that when I do actual presentations is we show how people light up their houses just because they want to make them look pretty. It's like jewelry. It's like jewelry, basically. It's like jewelry, basically, of your home. And that's really not necessary. But if you point the lights down and they're shielded, right? What you can find is you can go to like 2,500 or 3,000 Kelvin. That's the color. Get the right color. It's like the old yellowish flame that's prettier, right? And you can actually light up and be quite safe. People are just, they're not really used to having the old way of lighting. They're used to everything being lit up. like gas stations, for example, they figured out in the 70s that all they got to do is light up like, like a beacon in the distance, and people will just like moths go to it, right? And it's not necessary. It's well beyond what is necessary for actual walking around and doing what you need to do.
Jackie, in just the couple of minutes we have left, how can people get involved with your organization?
Well, they can simply go to Dark Sky, Missouri and get all the information that they want, that they ever want. And they can contact me through either that website or askc.org. So, and I keep a supply of all of these handy. I recently helped out some people in suburban city on the Kansas side of the river, and where the city was coming in and putting all new streetlights in. And they started putting them in, and they realized instead of most of the light going down, these were quaint little lights with 4 sides, and the light was blasting out this way everywhere and lighting up their bedrooms at night. So I helped them on that, and I believe they got the city had to order shields to come down over those lights. So those are the kind of things we do. Yeah.
So progress is being made. Don, I'll let you get the last word in. If we reduce this light, what are we going to see in the sky that we're missing now?
Well, I hope we'll see some stars. And by the way, I do think it's important. You guys are going through in Kansas City a streetlight assessment program right now. And I think you should learn more about what's going on, because if you go the wrong direction, you're going to have really bright lights with wrong colors. And I think if you can lower your light temperatures, I think they're looking at replacing some 80,000 streetlights in Kansas City. And there's you can go to our website, Dark Sky Missouri. There's an article by the Missouri Sierra Club that talks about what's going on. By the way, you can home certify. You can get your home certified to be dark sky friendly. That's on the website as well. You can go through the principles and you can look at your light fixtures. It's just kind of a fun little project. And so those are a couple of action steps that you can take.
And we will share some photos of what a dark sky really looks like and the things that we're missing. I would think that one thing folks could do is try to get outside the city limits where you've got less light and take a look up and see what you're missing. And then jump on darkskymissouri.org. Yes, if you live in Kansas, there's nothing that limits you from going to that website. And there's some great information, things that you yourself can do to make a difference. Thank you to both of you for bringing this issue and this topic and working on it on behalf of everyone. And we want to thank you for listening to KC Cares, Kansas City's nonprofit voice. We're produced by Charitable Communications. We're proudly sponsored by the Ewing Marion Kauffman Foundation. To be a guest on KC Cares or underwriting opportunities to support what we're doing, please visit our website at kccaresonline.org and spread the love. You'll find us on Facebook and Twitter at KC Cares Radio and on Instagram at KC Cares Online. And you can catch us on ESPN 1510 AM and 94.5 FM Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. Thank you for listening to KC Cares.